Little by little, it came to him. Once, long ago, in connection with his geological life work, he had read of something like that cube. It had to do with those debatable and disquieting clay fragments called the Eltdown Shards, dug up from pre-Carboniferous strata in southern England 30 years before. Their shape and markings were so queer that a few scholars hinted at artificiality, and made wild conjectures about them and their origin. They came clearly from a time when no human beings could exist on the globe, but their contours and figurings were damnably puzzling. That was how they got their name. It was not, however, in the writings of any sober scientist that Campbell had seen that reference to a crystal disc-holding globe. The source was far less reputable and infinitely more vivid. About 1912, a deeply learned Sussex clergyman of occultist leanings, the Reverend Arthur Brooke Wintershall, had professed the identity of the markings on the Eltdown Shards with some of the so-called pre-human hieroglyphics, persistently cherished and esoterically handed down in certain mystical circles, and had published at his own expense what purported to be a translation of the primal and baffling inscriptions, a translation still quoted frequently and seriously by occult writers. In this translation, a surprisingly long brochure in view of the limited number of shards existed. Had occurred the narrative, supposedly of pre-human authorship, containing the now frightening reference. As the story went, there dwelt on a world and eventually on countless other worlds of outer space a mighty order of worm-like beings whose attainments and whose control of nature surpassed anything within the range of terrestrial imagination. They had mastered the art of interstellar travel early in their career and had peopled every habitable planet in their own galaxy, killing off the races they found. Beyond the limits of their own galaxy, which was not ours, they could not navigate in person, but in their quest for knowledge of all space and time, they discovered a means of spanning certain transgalactic gulfs with their minds. They devised peculiar objects, strangely energized cubes of a curious crystal containing hypnotic talisman and enclosed in space-resisting spherical envelopes of an unknown substance, which could be forcibly expelled beyond the limits of their universe, and which would respond to the attraction of cool, solid matter only. These, of which a few would necessarily land on various inhabited worlds in outside universes, formed the ether bridges needed for mental communication. Atmospheric friction burned away the protecting envelope, leaving the cube exposed and subject to discovery by the intelligent minds of the world where it fell. By its very nature, the cube would attract and rivet attention. This, when coupled with the action of light, was sufficient to set its special properties working. The mind that noticed the cube would be drawn into it by the power of the disk and would be sent on a thread of obscure energy to the place whence the disk had come, the remote world of the worm-like space explorers across stupendous galactic abysses, received in one of the machines to which each cube was attuned. The captured mind would remain suspended without body or senses until examined by one of the dominant race. Then it would, by an obscure process of interchange, be pumped of all its contents. The investigator's mind would now occupy the strange machine while the captive mind occupied the interrogator's worm-like body. Then, in another interchange, the interrogator's mind would leap across boundless space to the captive's vacant and unconscious body on the transgalactic world, animating the alien tenement as best it might and exploring the alien world in the guise of one of its denizens. When done with exploration, the adventurer would use the cube and its disk in accomplishing his return, and sometimes the captured mind would be restored safely to its own remote world. Not always, however, was the dominant race so kind. Sometimes when a potentially important race capable of space travel was found, the worm-like folk would employ the cube to capture and annihilate minds by the thousands, and would extirpate the race for diplomatic reasons, using the exploring minds as agents of destruction. In other cases, sections of the worm folk would permanently occupy a transgalactic planet, destroying the captured minds and wiping out the remaining inhabitants, preparatory to settling down in unfamiliar bodies. Never, however, could the parent civilization be quite duplicated in such a case, since the new planet would not attain all materials necessary for the worm's race's arts. The cubes, for example, could be made only on the home planet. Only a few of the numberless cubes sent forth ever found a landing in response on an inhabited world, since there was no such thing as aiming them at goals beyond sight or knowledge. Only 3, ran the story, had ever landed on peopled worlds in our own particular universe. One of these had struck a planet near the galactic rim 2,000 billion years ago, while another had lodged 3 billion years ago on a world near the center of the galaxy. The third, and the only one ever known to have invaded the solar system, had reached our own Earth 150 million years ago. It was with this latter that Dr. Winterhall's translation chiefly dealt. When the cube struck the Earth, he wrote, the ruling terrestrial species was a huge cone-shaped race, surpassing all others before or since in mentality and achievements. This race was so advanced that it had actually sent minds abroad in both space and time to explore the cosmos, hence recognize something of what had happened when the cube fell from the sky and certain individuals had suffered mental change after gazing at it. Realizing that the changed individuals represented invading minds, the race's leaders had them destroyed, even at the cost of leaving the displaced minds exiled in alien space. They had had experience with even stranger transitions. When, through a mental exploration of space and time, they formed a rough idea of what the cube was, they carefully hid the thing from light and sight and guarded it as a menace. They did not wish to destroy a thing so rich in later experimental possibilities. Now and then, some rash, unscrupulous adventurer would furtively gain access to it and sample its perilous powers despite the consequences, but all such cases were discovered and safely and drastically dealt with. Of this evil meddling, the only bad result was that the worm-like outside race learned from the new exiles what had happened to their explorers on Earth and conceived a violent hatred of the planet and all its life forms. They would have depopulated it if they could, and indeed sent additional cubes into space in the wild hope of striking it by accident in unguarded places, but that accident never came to pass. The cone-shaped terrestrial beings kept the one existing cube in a special shrine as a relic and basis for experiments till after aeons it was lost amidst the chaos of war and the destruction of the great polar city where it was guarded. When 50 million years ago the beings sent their minds ahead into the infinite future to avoid a nameless peril of inner Earth, the whereabouts of the sinister cube from space were unknown.